Recently in one of my videos, a comment war got started on how could people possibly think that the bots are easier than the bugs. Now before I get started, let me be clear, of course, your playstyle, what stratagems you bring, the people you play with, there are a lot of factors that can influence which one is, quote, harder. So this isn't an end-all be-all, but rather just some perspective on things that could make the bots easier than the bugs for some players. The number one thing is the weak points. They're giant glowing weak points. With just a laser cannon, you can basically trivialize every single encounter with the bots. The laser cannon can melt the hulks, it can melt the tanks, it can melt the turrets, you can even take out the entire factory striders with a few sustained seconds to the eye. And even your primaries can shred through the regular units if you're regularly hitting headshots or the weak points. Which this might be its own point, but I'll put it as point 1.5, which is just the general shape of them. They have a much more humanoid design, and for many people, that is much easier for them to target. You're used to playing Call of Duty, Halo, any sort of FPS where you're fighting other people, other players. You're dealing with typically a humanoid shape, so they're more used to hitting those weak points and hitting that body shape than they are the bugs. If you're on a map with a ton of gunships, well guess what? Laser cannon takes them out as well. Oh no, it's a jet brigade planet. Laser cannon can sweep through and wipe out the entire jet brigade in one little burst. Like, it takes out every single enemy with just one stratagem for the entire map, no matter what map you're on. Compare that to your average planet if you're playing on a level 10 difficulty, especially if you're in the Gloom, where you have the bile spewers, which require some sort of explosive like an auto cannon or the crossbow, the wasp, something that helps you take down that huge health pool. And then you need something different for taking out the bile titans / chargers / behemoths. And then you've got to deal with the huge swarms of hunters and other things. You need a much bigger variety and rely on those teammates to have other tools for taking down the entire map. Whereas again, on the bots, you just bring the laser cannon and boom, you can solo the entire map. There's not a single thing you're going to run into that you can't handle on your own. Number 2 is the heavy armor. Especially if you're bringing heavy armor that's explosive resistant, it basically makes you invulnerable. When you're fighting the bugs, you can wear heavy armor to take less damage, but if the bugs get in close, you basically have no way of outrunning them. You cannot outrun a bile titan in heavy armor, it's just not going to happen. Meanwhile, because most of the bots are ranged, they're going to stay at a range so that slowness of the heavy armor isn't as big as a downside, but you're way more durable, again, especially if you bring the explosive resistant armor. I'll put this as a 2.5, but it could also be its own point just like previously, but also consider that the bots turn much more slowly, and the reason I'm putting this with the armor is because you can just walk right through them. All the bugs, if you get too close to them, they're going to be slashing and jumping around, and they're going to hit you and take you down. Whereas the bots, because they turn slowly, you can literally just run right past them, especially if you're in zooming fast armor, you can just run right through them and not even be impacted by them. Point number 3, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but I'm going to stand by it. Stratagems are generally more effective on bots than they are on bugs. Consider your turrets. How many times have you thrown down a turret for a random charger to spawn out of nowhere and just ram right into it because the turret can't do anything to it? Consider the anti-tank emplacement. Yes, you can bring it on the bugs, but because they're melee, they're just going to swarm it and destroy it in a matter of seconds. On a bot map, especially if you're lucky, you can place that thing up on a cliffside and wipe out half the map from the safety of 100 miles away with it. And typically bot maps have more rocks for you to stand on top of or more area for you to get up above to be able to do that. And things like taking out a giant fortress versus taking out the giant mega nest are way different experiences. With the mega nest, you're running in tight quarters and things are spawning all around you, and you're in the thick of it with these fast melee creatures coming after you. Whereas with the fortress, you can put the anti-tank emplacement on a cliff nearby or far away and take out half of it, if not all of it, from a distance without even engaging the enemies. And then you've got things you basically only use on bots, like the giant shield or smoke stratagems. All those sort of things basically only work on the bots. I mean, sure, you could bring it on the bugs, but what good is the smoke going to do on a bug planet? And then to top all of that off, you can actually use the mortar on these planets. If you bring a mortar on a bug planet, you're just going to end up bombing yourself and everyone's going to get mad at you. At least on most bot planets, the bots stay far enough away that the mortar could effectively be used. I still don't recommend bringing it because you're still going to take some friendly fire, you're going to take your friends out, they're going to get mad at you, but for the most part, it still is usable on these planets where it's not usable anywhere else. Point number 4. You can actually use some tactics against the bots. You can use strategy like utilizing cover or running away and re-engaging. I'm mostly going to focus on the cover because that only works against the bots and I guess the Illumina. We're not really talking about the Illumina right now. The cover actually works against bots and that's super effective. Like here where we deployed our own personal cover shield. Again, this is a stratagem you basically only see on the bots and I can sit here, take 0 damage and destroy a factory strider by shooting it in the eye. You can also hide behind rocks and shoot the rocket dudes, and then the second they reload their rockets, you hide behind the rock, and boom, they're going to shoot the rock, you pop out, you take them out, no damage. Nice and easy. For my next point, I'm going to say this one isn't the most solid point, but I'll bring it up because I've really never seen many people bring it up. But the amount of units that can call in reinforcements for the bots is much lower than the bugs. Only the really small bots can call in reinforcements, whereas the bugs have all the small units that can and the medium units. There's just a lot more variety where if you miss one unit, they can call in reinforcement, whereas the bots, you just take out that small group of infantry that comes with it, and they're not going to be able to call in the reinforcements. And even if they do call in the reinforcements, you can blast them out of the air before they even get to you, whereas the bugs, they have to emerge from the ground. There is no stopping them from spawning. Side note, this was the coolest thing ever except for hitting the rock. I was able to jetpack in and throw that perfectly placed beacon. Look at that. Boom! Take out that factory strider. That would have been so cool, like clippable moment if I hadn't have hit that rock and looked like a dork. I think my last point will be the most subjective one, but I do think it influences this discussion an awful lot, and I don't think a lot of people acknowledge it. And that is, people simply spend more time on the bugs. If you spent the same amount of time fighting the bots as you did the bugs, I think you would find that the bots are a lot easier. The problem is, a lot of people go against the bots, they get absolutely wrecked in the first or second mission, and they decide, oh, I like the bugs way more, they're easier, and then they go back to that. We've seen stat after stat after stat of people who are bug-only divers, or 90% of the time spent on the bugs, or they've spent 90% of their in-game time against the bugs. So if they spent the same amount of time against the bots, I feel like that strategy would up, but we're not at that point. As I said, people tend to have this, oh, I tried it once, I did poorly, I didn't like that experience, and I'm never going back. I'm sure a lot of people who went to the creek got that kind of PTSD from it and said, I'm never going back to the bots again after that opening day massacre. Okay, with all of that said, now that I've said my piece, this is your opportunity to say, hey, Waffles, I hear you, I heard all your points, and you're still wrong. So if you can, give me a solid point in the comments down below that refutes the points I've made here on why they are not easier, or at least why these aren't applicable, or at least make sense. And as always, thank you for watching, thank you for supporting, and have a blessed day.